Hey Blake, do you ever get discouraged after you're done preaching? And if so, why?
Well, let me just be honest, of course. Absolutely. I think I was definitely more discouraged after preaching when I first started preaching, but I still face that even now after preaching for over 10 years now. I think I get discouraged after preaching for a number of reasons. Number one, just obviously I'm just depleted. I'm tired. I'm emotionally spent. I feel like more like an airplane that gave out at gas and just had a crash landing and survived it when I'm done preaching. Sometimes I'm super energized after preaching. That's not regular for me. I'm usually just exhausted. So when I get really tired, sometimes my temperament lends me to be more kind of a sad or despondent kind of disposition. But I think other times I'm discouraged in preaching or after preaching. Number one, maybe I just felt like I didn't do a good job. I felt like it wasn't clear when I was preaching it, or I spent too long at one point, or I preached too long and people looked bored, or I felt like I said something that was not necessarily true, or I was too angry or too harsh on a particular point, or maybe I said an illustration that I think could have wrongly offended people in a way that I don't think was helpful. I think number three, I just sometimes feel like, what am I doing? Like, am I really supposed to be a pastor? And this is kind of a joke sometimes as pastors get together. Do you think you'll still be a pastor come December? And it's kind of a joke, not to say everyone quit, but it is not abnormal for many pastors to feel inadequate, that they didn't measure up, and that they could have done a better job. And really, at the end of the day, we want to be humble and acknowledge that we can always do better, and only God can change hearts, and none of us are the best preacher. And on the same breath, we have to guard ourselves. We have to make sure that we're not putting our faith and our hope in our abilities or even the responses of people in the church. And so I would say some of my discouragement is not just from being tired or weary or feeling inadequate. Sometimes I'm putting my faith in the wrong person. I need to be putting it in the Lord. And sometimes I need to be reminded of that I'm just but dust. And even my, quote, best sermon in my eyes may not be all that great anyway. And the sermons that I feel that weren't all that good, God could use in profound ways. And so some of my discouragement is normal and realistic. Spiritual warfare certainly happens to ministers as they're sharing God's word. The enemy attacks in a variety of ways. That's happened to me more often than I can even realize, more often than I can count. I think some of my discouragement can come from being too focused on me or what others think of me, which is a form of pride and the fear of man. So certainly pray for me in that.